Alright, so we left off here, I don't know, was it 60 seconds ago? Again, have a wee bit of the cold can. This is, I try to come up with a plan for the stuff, and then I just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, and the concepts that we're going over, do I understand them? I don't know, some people would say that I don't understand shit, but I think I understand them, but still, there's a lot floating around as far as this stuff goes in my head, so recording these videos and jumping through a lot of the stuff, I mean, it's kind of taxing. Um, on a physical level, no, but uh, yeah, I don't know, kind of taxing. So I'm gonna move around on my seat here a little bit, have another sip, and I'm gonna think about how I want to approach exactly what I was trying to say in the previous video before I had to cut it off. And also, I mean, when I'm watching other video series on YouTube or something like that, I always kind of appreciate when the person steps out of character a little bit and becomes a little more human. So, I'm trying to do a little bit of that right now. But all right, we're gonna jump back in here. So, what are we talking about? We got available karma points we talked about in the video. Sequel 37, yada yada. Let's jump straight back into it. I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you watched the previous video. So, what's the logic of the menu here? The logic of the menu is that when the value of character creation karma points changes, which is this value right here, we're going to apply the difference of whatever we're changing this value to player karma. So let's see if we can maybe quantify that a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically list some event calculations is what we would call it. Talk to, did we talk about it? Not a whole lot, but we certainly use the phrase event-based a lot in some of the previous videos. We'll start talking or start quantifying what exactly that means in the context of games and just as a concept pretty much right now. So when the value of character creation karma points changes, we're going to apply the difference to the player karma. Right now, what is the player karma? Player karma is 0. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to go back in this menu in a minute. We're going to click on something, and when we click on something, what is it going to do? Well, it's going to fire an event, is the way that it's normally referred to. But basically, it's going to inform, when we click on add karma or reduce karma, it's going to create an event, and it's going to notify the game itself, the application, Shadowrun, that we've done something in a menu that requires it to take a certain action. And there's a whole series of things that we could jump into about how does it know which event to take. And specifically, it's known as callbacks. Um, it's just, again, I have a terrible habit of diverging, but fuck it, we're gonna do it anyway. Go to Wikipedia, type in callback computer programming. What is it? It's executable code that passes an argument to other code, which is expected to call back or, i.e., execute the argument at some convenient time. That's great. Does that mean anything? Does that help us? No. But in the event that you want to pause this video or just be like, hey, this guy's retarded, I can deal with the rest on my own. If you want to jump into that kind of thing, you can certainly. This is where you're going to go. Little graph here. I'm not going to go into that quite yet. This is something that we will get into in later videos, but we're going to be forced to get into it in later videos, but we're certainly not going to do it right now. So anyway, let's get back to what's relevant to us in the previous video. When we click on one of these things here, it's going to apply the difference to the player karma. So we're going to Alt-Tab back. Nope, we're not going to Alt-Tab back. Now we're going to Alt-Tab back. We're going to click this thing, and when we subtract karma, or when we click this button, it's going to subtract, according to internal rules, karma from whatever the available amount is. We're not spending a point, so it's actually going to add the karma back here. So if I don't know, we'll prove that let's click that button here so we can maybe make this more concrete in a less confusing way. So when we click this button here, we're spending points. So what it's going to do is it's going to add the difference of whatever the game thinks. You know, hey, this to click this button right here is going to cost you a certain amount of karma. What is the game going to do? It's going to, using internal rules that we essentially have no way to find. We could go in and, you know, maybe we could find these rules, but there's actually a way that we can do this, and that's something that we'll get into. Specifically, we're going to deal with this when it comes to code injection. We will come right back to the same screen, and when we start doing code injection and things like that, we will be able to essentially sort of overwrite some of the routines in the game, so that, you know, when the game says, hey, when you click this button, I'm going to do a calculation, we'll be able to sort of stomp or clobber that calculation that the game is programmed in the source code. We'll be able to overwrite that calculation and say, nope, you know, you're not going to do what you thought you were going to do. We're going to rewrite the rules for that. Here's the rules that you're going to follow, and that's an incredibly useful tool, and something we'll get into. But again, for our purposes, when we click this button, the game will internally calculate the value to add to the available karma. It's going to be the difference between, you know, whatever the value that the game calculates is, and whatever that difference, you know, as applied to our player karma. So let's do that. We're going to spend 1 point. Or, you know, it's a misnomer. Are we spending 1 point? No, we're increasing this skill by 1. I've been saying spend 1 point, but yes, the pedantic people out there will say, well, you know, you're not really spending 1 point. You're just increasing the value by 1 or increasing the skill by 1, and the game is a set of internal rules. And you know what? We just talked about that. So anyway, we are going to increase this skill by 1. So there you go. Increases it by 1. There's a cost associated with increasing that skill by 1. What's the cost of that skill? Doesn't matter. There's some internal routine that calculates that value. It's going to return the value of the cost of increasing this skill by 1, and then it's going to take the value as returned by that routine, and it's going to add that difference as a positive or a negative number onto our available karma points during character creation. So what do we mean? Well, you know, what do you mean? Is it really going to add it on? Yes, it's going to add it on, because if it's the internal routine will calculate that value. Doesn't matter if it's positive or negative. If it's going to cost us a point, then it will return a negative number. If it's going to give us a point, it will return a positive number. In that way, the internal routine of the game is completely agnostic as far as what the available karma is. It's just going to have a mathematical equation, if you will. It's going to determine what the cost is, and then it's just going to return it positive or negative number. There's no logic associated with it. So, you know, if we wanted to codify this a little bit more, say event calculations. So we're going to sort of redo this a little bit. When the value of character creation karma points changes, what are we going to do? We're going to, instead of just jumping right into this routine of applying the difference to that, we're going to just sort of inject a little bit here and say the game, our internal routine, will calculate the cost of increasing the selected skill by some amount. We're not going to put another space in. Then that routine will return this value, or will return a value, signed or unsigned. The game will then add this value, signed or unsigned, because it doesn't matter. You add a negative number to a positive number, it's essentially subtraction. It's a nice fancy rule of math, or wouldn't even call it fancy, but it's a basic rule that we're going to use, that programming uses to its advantage. Before we finish this, let's double check, see if we're bumping up against the limit. Getting a little close. So, game will then add this value, signed or unsigned, to the variable player karma. So we can see here that we've essentially codified in our pseudo programming language that whenever we click on a button in this menu, whenever this value changes, an internal routine will calculate the cost of let's get rid of of increasing the selected skill by some amount. It's an arbitrary amount. In this case, it's discrete jumps, so we're only able to increase the skill by 1. Doesn't mean that we're only spending 1 karma point, but just, every time we increase the skill, we can only increase or decrease it in discrete steps of 1. There's internal routines in the game that will say, you're going from 2 to 3. What's the cost associated with that? Doesn't matter. We don't care about that in this context. But then you're going from 2 or from 3 to 2. So what does that mean? Well, there's internal routines that say, hey, here's how much karma I should give back. We click on this button. There's internal tables and whatnot that it says, you're going from range combat 0 to 1. What's the cost of that? It's 1. And then you click on negate here, as the case may be. It says, we're going from 1 to 0. What's the value I should return? Returns 1 in this case, adds it back. So you can see that we've essentially codified the logic of this menu in our abstract, sort of completely fake and made up programming language here. And we're totally indifferent to signed and unsigned values. If we were to extend this out and if we were to have to accept values of karma in 2 billion, then we'd have to put some rules in place as far as what are we going to do when it's 2 billion, and what are we going to do when it's negative 2 billion, and things like that. But generally, it's not something that when programs are written, and especially menus and things like that, when menus are written, there's sort of an implicit, or there's an implied amount of there's an implied range of values. So I mean, it's in the actual Shadowrun source code. Is there conditionals and whatnot checking for whether this value is over 2 billion or under 2 billion? I have not seen the Shadowrun source code, but I feel pretty safe in saying that no. Because the standpoint of an application developer is not that I need to handle every possible instance of a value being entered into my menu or program or whatnot. It's I will define a set of rules inside internal to this menu that define the discrete jumps that we can have in values. And if someone wants to load up a memory editor like Cheat Engine and start, poking ridiculous values into the available karma thing, into the memory location that represents available karma here, then they are way outside what application support would be considered. They're completely on their own, and that they are just no developer in their right mind is ever going to care that you post on the forum or something like that and say, hey, I was messing around with your game, and I was cramming 2 billion into a byte value, and it's coming up with -3, and I have no idea why. They're going to tell you to basically eat shit, and they should, quite frankly, because again, there are rules here, there are rules in place. This whole thing right here, there is a massive amount of subtlety and complexity associated with it, and the whole point of this video series up to now has been to cover some of that complexity and some of that subtleness and whatnot. So at this point, we know why we're not going to start stuffing 2 billion into this value, because rollover rules and signed bits and signed data types, unsigned data types. So, I mean, we understand why, but someone who downloads Cheat Engine, likes to play Shadowrun, comes to this menu, has an extremely basic understanding of Cheat Engine and what it does, and they just start smashing huge values into any value they can find, or huge constants into any value they find. They're going to quickly wind up crashing their game, or ending up with nonsensical values, and we know why that is, and they may or may not, but again, we sort of demonstrated the point here, and we'll pick it up a little bit in the next video.